This is my intro. There are many others like it, but this one is mine. Hi, welcome back to Boilerplate Socialism. This is Dan, and thank you for joining me today. Before we go on, I wanted to thank Loch Ness Munster for commenting and discussing on my videos. I sense we have some fundamental disagreements, but at the same time, I think you are speaking in good faith. I enjoy talking to you. I will try to get back to your comments as soon as possible. I'm a little swamped with homework this week, but I will get back to you. So if you so like, please keep commenting, and I hope we can keep talking. So anyways, today I'm doing something slightly different. After my episode on feminism, a friend asked me to talk about famous socialist women of the socialist movement. Okay, there we go. So today I wanted to start with someone who is in the West, a little bit more obscure, Nadezhda Krupskaya. Otherwise, the wife of Vladimir Lenin, first premier of the Soviet Union. She's a very fascinating figure and is in fact so much more than Lenin's wife. She was born in 1869 to a cavalry officer and a school teacher. Her father lost his career after getting into radical politics. He supported parliamentary democracy, which basically killed his career. She would eventually go on to higher education, even earning a gold medal of academic excellence in 1892. 1882. She would then go on to become a teaching assistant at factories, where she would teach weekend courses on literacy and classes to factory workers in the St. Petersburg area. Nominally, this was so that the workers could become more effective workers, because Russia was, however, slowly becoming industrialized, and frankly, illiterate peasants weren't going to cut it in the modern workforce, especially as Russia was coming up against increasingly fierce competition from the heavily industrialized German, French, and English empires. But during this time, she managed to sneak in Marxist literature into her lessons, which was considered highly illegal. She developed an interest in Marx during her time in university, and for her activity, she was exiled to Siberia in 1892. There, she would choose to spend her exile with Vladimir Lenin, who she'd met a few years earlier as part of underground and illegal student Marxist circles. The two of them would live in Siberia for some time. Well, while she was doing heavy labor, she worked on Woman's Worker, a pamphlet that was the first ever socialist media dedicated to women's rights and women's issues. And then in 1895, she would become married to Lenin formally. Several times before that, she had pretended to be his wife in order to escape authorities when the two tried to flee Siberia, but in 1895 they tied the knot for real. In 1901, she became the editor of Ishka, which was, at the time, the main propaganda magazine of the Social Democrat movement, which is what the Communist Party was called before the split between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. She would play quite a role in this. She would code, decode, and recode messages to hide them from the secret police. And she was Lenin's secretary as well, and was a major organizer in the Bolshevik circles, basically right up until the Russian Revolution. In 1907, she and Lenin were exiled to Switzerland after the 1905 Russian Revolution, just due to their seditious activities, and after the Bolsheviks in the Duma, or Russian parliament, were arrested and exiled for winning elections. Don't mind me, I'm just consulting notes here. It's been a little hectic, so I couldn't exactly write a full script like I normally do. She was also in 1905 the head of the Commissar for Aid of Russian Prisoners of War, which is an organization ostensibly to recruit for the Bolsheviks internationally. She did have some aid from the German government, who were attempting to weaken the Tsarist government. She was also one of the first people to develop a theory of education. She developed a magazine called Free Education, which is what it was. She was the first person to develop an actual socialist theory of education. She put an emphasis not only on the arts and sciences, but also on physical labor and practical work like farm work and industrial work, in order to build solidarity. In 1917, she would come ahead of her husband Lenin into the Soviet Union. Well, not the Soviet Union, then the Russian Empire, in order to start setting up the groundwork for revolution when the provisional government was elected in February. After the October Revolution, she was elected as head of the education of the Vyborg Soviet Council, which was a suburb of St. Petersburg. After 1917 and the October Revolution, she would become the main Minister of Education for the Soviet Union, And she would basically build from scratch the Soviet library system. Prior to that, Russia had no national public library system. There were private libraries, and then there were quote-unquote union libraries, which belonged exclusively to companies, but were only for certain employees. At first, things got worse because the country was in a state of civil war, and there was in fact very little money for librarianship or scholarship or building up a proper library system. But eventually she would build the Soviet library system as it would be known right up until 1991. After the death of her husband, she became embroiled in the power struggles between Stalin and the other members of the Bolshevik faction. She would leave office, but would still be a school teacher and a roofer, among other things. In 1937, 2 years before her death, she was elected to the Supreme Soviet Council, the first woman to do so. As a woman, she led a rather formidable life. She was, well, like I said, we do tend to, when we learn about socialist history in the West, we tend to learn about, the main big names, the men, Lenin, Stalin, maybe Trotsky, if you're lucky. But she was there at the start. She was a major organizer in the party. She was on the front lines being arrested. She was exiled to Siberia, and she was seriously talking about the role of women's nature in socialism, as well as education. And moving forward today, these are important issues. We need to really think about women's education, women's empowerment as socialists. Because, as they say, the reactionaries, they have I don't want to say medieval because that's an insult to medieval people. They have a Bronze Age view of gender and gender relations. So as socialists, our first priority is to, among others, bring the emancipation of women. And so that is our first big socialist lady. In the future, I might do more figures of socialism, depending. Next week, I'm going to try and return to explaining concepts. I hope that works out. And again, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a comment. If you disagree with me, let's have a conversation. So thank you very much for your time, and have an excellent day. This has been Dan, and remember to like and subscribe. Have a fantastic day. This is my outro. There are many others like it, but this one is mine.